You're listening to Beyond the Measure, episode 25. Listen as I, a young composer, and my wife, a young choir director, interview other music educators in order to gain insight into their own success in the classroom. We have a lot to learn, and we want you to learn with us. No matter your age, ensemble, or experience, this is the ideal podcast for music educators, composers, and students alike. So join us as we go beyond the measure.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Beyond the Measure. This is one of your co-hosts, Kara, and I'm here with...
Christian, the other co-host.
Yeah.
Yes.
How's it going, Christian?
It's going good. We're just looking at each other weird because I had no idea how to respond to introducing myself, even though we've done this so many times.
If you're new here, this is a music education podcast where we basically interview music educators of all different backgrounds, band, choir, orchestra, and we just kind of get to know their story and get some more insight and advice on what they have experienced.
We just want to say thank you for joining us and giving this podcast a shot as you listen. If this is not your first time and you've been listening before, we really appreciate your support. We would actually love it if you left us a rating and or review on whichever platform you listen to. That would greatly benefit our podcast and to help it grow in the future. But without further ado, we'll tell a little bit more about today's guest.
So today we interview Dr. Troy Robertson. He's the director of choirs at Tarleton State University and the conductor of the Cross Timbers Civic Chorale. He's the founder of Choral, and before coming to Tarleton, he taught at Ithaca College and served for several years as choral director at East Gaston High School in North Carolina. He's also a composer whose works are published with Henshaw Music, Santa Barbara Music Press, Cola Voce, and Music Spoke.
Yeah, and you're going to hear in this conversation that, that's like a few of the things he's worked with from that bio that we just read. He's going to kind of go down the list, and he has a wide variety of groups that he's worked with, a lot of great experiences. But I think one of the coolest things that you're going to hear that we really want you to get from this is he talks about the importance of having basically what the foundation of your ensemble should be. And believe it or not, it's not necessarily musical ability. That is a very important factor, of course, and we do talk about that, but ultimately it boils down to the dynamic of the group and of the people in the ensemble and how it needs to be a supportive community. Your members need to be able to lean off of each other because ultimately that's going to be the foundation that provides them to have the strength to work with each other and get better and grow as an ensemble.
So without further ado, this is our interview with Dr. Troy Robertson.
Troy, thank you so much for being on the show with us today. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, so we were recommended that we interview you from our friend Travis Lowry, who we had on a previous episode a while back, and tell us again what's your connection to him.
Well, Travis and I have known each other for several years. I sing in his choir at First United Methodist here in Stephenville, which is a really outstanding choir for such a small town and a relatively small church. And Travis does a great job with it. And he, in turn, sings in my community ensemble, that's a symphonic chorus, and also sings in my small men's choir that's usually about a dozen guys or so.
Could you tell us what is it that you currently do in Stephenville?
Well, I'm the director of choirs at Tarleton State University, which means I am in charge of all of the choirs. I conduct them, and I teach conducting and some of our methods courses. My PhD is technically in music education, even though that also focused on conducting from Florida State University. And then I also do scholarships, recruiting. We do a whole lot of stuff. We're traveling in just a short while to England. Travis is actually going with us. And just have a great time with our various groups. We have a chamber choir that's kind of our advanced ensemble. I think this year we're at around 35, small men's choir, tenor bass, small treble choir, and then our symphonic chorus is usually around 100, 110. I think this spring, when it's usually a little bit less because we typically do a smaller program, we actually are going to have as many as 90 or so. So I'm really excited about that group this year. It's been fantastic, and of those, it's going to be around 30 that go with us to England. So that England chorus is going to be pretty sizable as well, but somewhere between 40 and 50.
Wow.
That's a lot of people in your ensembles. That's impressive. In fact, we'll start with your story here in a minute, but in a little while, I think we'll definitely want to ask about just, how do you get a program that big and everything. But before we get there, I mean, we'd love to just hear, how did you come to, first of all, how did you just come to do music for a living, and how did you get to where you are now at Tarleton?
Well, from what I understand, I have the most common story there is, which is that I was going through school and did a lot of different things, but had the best teacher I'd ever had in the person of Judy Spears. She is retired now and traveling the world with her husband, Ira, but before that, she was just an amazing chorus teacher. She always had, 10, 12 students every year at Georgia All-State, usually one at Georgia Governor's Honors. She became Georgia Music Educators Association president shortly before she retired. Just had a really wonderful career. And the challenge that she offered us, as well as her focus on music literacy, because I couldn't read until I was in ninth grade, it really pushed a lot of us toward music. We found that we had something we loved in the form of chorus, and from there, it was a question of, could I get into a school where I felt like I'd receive the training I would need? So I went to Furman University and graduated there in 2001. Went from there to UNC Greensboro. While I was at Furman, I studied with Bing Vick and Bill Thomas. And at UNC Greensboro, that was when Bill Carroll was there. Bill Young is still there. And it was also Richard Cox before he passed away. Richard Cox is a kind of a big name from ancient ACDA history, not to give away too much about him, but he was a great mentor, as well as Bill and Bill. And then from there, I taught high school in North Carolina. I had 3 choruses at East Gaston High School. We were on a 4-period day, so I had 9th grade, 10th grade, and then an upperclassmen group, 11 and 12. While I was there, I taught with the Gaston County Choral Ensemble with Trip McGill, which is kind of a sort of a magnet community group. It was free for students from all over the county. I also served as the associate conductor of the Charlotte Oratorio Singers, which is the symphonic chorus for the city of Charlotte Symphony, with Scott Jarrett, and worked with their chamber group and their symphonic group, and did some conducting as well as a lot of singing and a little bit of traveling. And worked for a CBF church there in Gastonia as well, where I had adults and children and youth and handbells, and did all kinds of stuff. And then from there, I went to Florida State, as I mentioned, and I spent 1 year, and there I studied with Andre Thomas and Kevin Fenton and Judy Bowers and Cliff Madsen. And then after that, went to Ithaca College, where I pretended to be Janet Galvan for a year while she was on sabbatical, and then got my job at Tarleton. And this is actually my 11th year at Tarleton. It's hard to believe, but I'm in year 11.
Man, I mean, one of the recurring themes we really have with a lot of people we interview on here is one that they just have such a wide variety of experiences on, where they've taught and where they've sung and conducted, and or just the types of ensembles and different sort of situations and scenarios that they've been able to put their skills to use. And that's just a really, really long list of places that you've been able to go. and that's
I'm
amazing.
Oh
no, it's great. And so, I'm just curious, are there any out of all those places you named, I don't know if it's easy to pick a favorite, but are there any that stick out to you as really being, integral in growing you as a musician and as a educator?
No. Every experience I've had has been so vital to who I am now. I could never pick out one that was the most important. And of all those mentors that I named, and especially including Trip McGill in Gaston County, and his actually one of his feeder teachers, Ellen Brown. They're both now retired. All those folks have made me who I am, and I owe a great debt to all those students and teachers and colleagues. It's been a great experience.
So I kind of want to know. So you just mentioned this earlier, right before you kind of got into everything that you've done so far. You got a good number of students in your choral program at Tarleton. First of all, I'm curious, when you first came to Tarleton, were the numbers similar, or did it look any different at the time?
Well, Tarleton has always been sort of a small program, and so my chamber choir is 35, but I have a decent number of non-majors in that ensemble, so it's still a small program. We have about 120 music majors at Tarleton, most of whom are instrumentalists. And before I came to Tarleton, Chuck Reeves was the director of choirs there, and Chuck had been there for 29 years. The name that is sort of better known than either Chuck or myself in Texas is Herb Teat, who was at one time TMEA president and was just an amazing educator. I believe he had come to Tarleton from Westminster Choir College, if I recall correctly. I may be mistaken, but I think that was his background. And so Tarleton has had a pretty long history of a great choral program, and turning out great, especially music teachers.
Well, we went to Hardin-Simmons, and so the numbers that you say are just like much larger than what we experienced. Like, our first year, our freshman year, our choir program was. I mean,
it was probably around 40 or so students, 40 to 50, and at a smaller school like Hardin-Simmons, that's a lot.
Well, Furman Singers was 120. So that was my undergraduate experience at Furman. It was 120 there. So
I was gonna say, people probably listening from that go to like UNT or whatever, like the big schools, are probably listening to us like, what? That's not big. That's like mid-size or something.
Right.
But no, that's great.
But no, I know Hardin-Simmons and have sung with the Abilene Chamber Singers a couple times actually, and have a lot of respect for especially Kalel and his son Josh. So.
Yeah,
they're great people, and what's nice about Tarleton and Stephenville is it's a bit of a drive from Abilene, but it's not like super far. It's like an hour and a half, I think. So it's one of those kind of nice. Y'all are kind of like, I feel like y'all are kind of our first big music neighbor, I guess you could say.
Yeah, well, and going to Abilene always feels like I've arrived in the real Texas, because it's got a feeling of being a little more out west than where we are.
Now, you also compose choral music, is that correct?
Yes, something I've always enjoyed. I don't do nearly as much as I used to, but yeah, I have written a number of pieces.
Yeah, that's great. And so, I mean, I always just have to ask this, since I'm a composer, and when we have guests on that have experience in composing and maybe even have published works out there. First of all, how did you come to start composing? Was that something you just kind of did as a hobby, or was it something that kind of started out of necessity, or how'd that get going?
I've found that the creative efforts I've made that I've enjoyed the most in my life have always been the product of just realizing like, oh, I can do this. And so I started by beginning to write for AP Theory in high school for Mrs. Spears, who I mentioned, for Judy Spears. I think my first full arrangement was Found a Peanut, which nobody ever performed. And then when I went to Furman, I was in a men's group, and I probably wrote, 15 or 20 pieces for that men's group. A few of which were pretty good, and I went on to sort of reset for different ensembles, and several of which were really poor, but I sort of forced all my friends to sing them anyway. And then I kind of took a bit of a hiatus when I was teaching high school. I mean, all those jobs I listed off, several of them were while I was teaching high school, and so I was pretty stretched. Well, I was stretched beyond thin. I was really almost stretched to breaking. And I only wrote a couple pieces during that time, one of which is actually published, however. I wrote a little setting of Patapan for my 10th graders, cool. And that's published through Henshaw. And then when I went back to Florida State for my doctoral degree, one of the things you have to do as a professor is you're expected to contribute creatively, and that can be through performance or through historical work or whatever. And I knew I liked composing, so I sort of picked that back up again. Was really fortunate to have a mentor in Kevin Fenton who really loves my writing. I feel like he must be my biggest fan because he really encouraged me. Andre Thomas encouraged me and put one of my pieces into his choral series. Actually, I think it was Patapan. That was the first one that he pulled into his choral series. And then from there, I wrote a piece for the University Singers when they sang at National ACDA in Dallas. And the piece that folks would probably know of mine, In Meeting We Are Blessed, I wrote for Kevin when he took Festival Singers of Florida to Kenya. And I was actually fortunate enough to end up going on that trip. And since that time, that piece has really been championed by several people, but especially Tessa Wandamaniu up at St. Olaf and Jessica Napolis at UNT. And so I think it takes a champion to sort of get a piece out there and give it an audience, but those two have really been advocates for my music, as well as Jeffrey Benson at San Jose State University.
Wow, yeah, that's awesome. And I bet it definitely helped having, with how far around you've been and all those different sort of connections you had. I would imagine that really played a big role in, having already having those pre-established.
Yeah, well, it does play a role. Yeah, and it's funny, maybe you've experienced this yourself as a composer, but you never quite know what folks are going to take to that you write. And In Meeting We Are Blessed was something I wrote in maybe a few days, and I don't feel like it's the worst for it, but it's not something I'd been stewing over for months and months and months. But that's the one that kind of took off, and by far has sold the most copies of anything I've written by probably a couple orders of magnitude.
Now I want to ask about going back to your choir program at Tarleton. We were we were kind of talking about the numbers and everything, but numbers aside, what all do you do? Because again, like compared to us, Tarleton is a larger campus. Obviously, it's not ginormous compared to a lot of other larger state schools, but for a campus that's pretty good size, what do you all do to try to keep students interested in choir and keep them coming in and as far as like recruitment and retention goes?
Well, I'll start with the most boring element, which is that we are really lucky to have great support from the university in the form of scholarships, and also we get a little bit of a budget. And so those things are indispensable. You really need to have the support of the institution, and Tarleton is a wonderful place to work for that reason. And then toward the kind of the heart of the matter, when I was in Furman Singers at Furman University, which is in South Carolina, Bing Vic had a little motto, which was discipline, beauty, excellence. And he had taken that from a letter he received, sort of a fan letter he received from somebody when they had gone on tour. And that was his motto. And I've modified it slightly to community, excellence, beauty. And use that for my own group. And my emphasis is really as a teacher and as a choral director on the community, because I had an experience early on, and I won't name any names, when I was in a quote unquote professional ensemble. I was 22, and I think I'm a good reader and a good musician and have a nice voice. And so I got in there and I was like, wow, this is great to be performing at a high level. And that lasted maybe a month, but the group didn't really speak to each other, and there wasn't a sense that they really liked each other, and it was sort of like, look how great we are, we're doing all this difficult repertoire, and boy, we can really sing. And that was when it was really driven home to me that excellence was not super motivating for me. I've been in some amazing ensembles at Furman and UNC Greensboro and at Florida State University. And I've been really, really proud of some of my choirs at Tarleton. But it's always the moments that we have that are part of our experience together as a community, being in a special place or having worked really, really hard together overcoming the difficulties of a particular event. I mean, we can all think of the COVID pandemic, for example. We worked really, really hard during that time. I mean, that was some of the hardest I've worked in my entire life. Those are always the things that have made me feel great about what I do, is that overcoming and bringing people together into a sense of community. And I would say that in terms of the numbers, I think that's really a testament to that sense of community, because those numbers in that big chorus I mentioned, those are largely driven by the Stephenville community. And you probably know Stephenville is not a big place. So we have, a pretty decent size symphonic chorus. It's only about 20 less people than I sang with in Charlotte, in a city that is about, I don't know, a 20th the size of Charlotte. I don't even know how big Charlotte is these days, but much, much, much smaller than Charlotte. And not only do we have the numbers of people, but also that community, when I call on them, we have a need, they immediately respond. We've been able to establish an endowed account to fund our Masterworks concert that's with the Fort Worth Symphony. On this trip to England, they contributed over $8,000 to those students being able to go on the trip and to really bring down the cost for those students. They really come together, I think, because of that sort of sense of community and coherence that's part of the group. So really important to me, and I think it bears fruit.
Wow. First of all, that's incredible. That's such a great explanation on that. I want to know, when it comes to fostering that community, that supportive community. And well, first of all, I do want to say, I completely agree with you. I think we both, I think I can speak for both of us.
We've experienced stuff like that as well, just in a professional group like that, very snobby, uppity type of, everybody just thinks that they're the best. And there's not really that, yeah, we're all coming to make music together, but we're not I don't know the right word to use, but
yeah, a little more individualistic approach than team driven. I think it's definitely easier to fall into that mindset with the more professional of an ensemble you're in. That humility is very important when it comes to forming that community. And honestly, I think that's something that I would assume a lot of us, because I went through it, especially, becoming an adult and singing a lot more professional, intense stuff. There really are times where I'm like, man, I miss high school choir, for those kind of things every now and then. But I wanted to say that what you said also reminded me of, again, I won't name names, but I was at a high school at one time, and I was in their band hall, and this is going to definitely sound like a Texas band thing to say. There was a huge sign that was it was like that paper and it had been painted, and it was up across the top of the room, and it just said, "Good is greater than fun." It was good, greater than sign, fun. And I remember looking at that and thinking, man, I get what they're saying, but also, there's pros and cons to that, right?
Yeah, well, and I will say I'm always looking for that balance, because there are people who they are fired up by aesthetic experiences and by excellence. And if you don't give them aesthetic experiences and excellence, they don't want to be part of the ensemble. So it's a tough balance to strike. And I've probably erred on both sides of it at one time or another.
Yeah, definitely. That's definitely a hard balance to get to, if ever, honestly. But
right.
Now you said you named there were it was community and excellence, or what were those three things that you adapted?
Well, and that's the reason for the motto: community, excellence, and beauty. Because one of my mentors, Judy Bowers, she's retired recently from Florida State University. Another one of the absolute greatest teachers I've ever known. Her phrase was, "They have to have an aesthetic experience," and she was talking about everybody from second graders through adults. And so I think that beauty component is important. Is very important. It's one of those three legs of the stool.
Let us take a quick break real quick so I can tell you a little bit about this podcast's primary sponsor, which is Christian Fortner Music. That's right, my own music business. This is the primary platform that I use to sell my music, and you can find it at www.christianfortner, that's Fortner, music.com. Now, you may be thinking, oh, I don't know, this guy is a young composer. Does he really know what he's doing? Well, to be honest, none of us composers really know what we're doing, if we're being completely honest with ourselves. But if you want to kind of get an idea of what my music might be like and if it might be a good fit for your ensemble, you can actually get a free copy of music from me. That's right, a free piece of music. This isn't just a study score. This is full score and parts that you can use for your ensemble to perform completely for free. And you can do that by signing up for my mailing list. So if you go to my website, Christian Fortner, that's Fortner, music.com/mailings, you can sign up for my mailing list right there, and you'll get a link in your inbox where you can select a piece of music for either choir, string orchestra, or band. And I should also mention that the choir piece, it can be either an SAB, SA, or TB version. So for any of you out there that are looking for SAB, SA, TB, specific voicings like that, then this might be a good opportunity for you. So yeah, that's about it. Again, if that's something you'd be interested in, just check it out on my website. And now we can get back to the episode. So with those, first of all, I think it's great that you've specifically designed and you've decided this is going to be our foundation as a choral program. I think that's something that's really easy to kind of forget about, and with any, not just choral programs, music programs, but organizations in general, of like, okay, we need to stop and decide what is going to be our values and our foundation of what we're striving towards, because without that vision, you have no direction, right? And so my question for you is, when it comes to achieving those different things, first of all, do you openly communicate that to your choirs, or is that more of a behind the scenes thing that you're just helping you make decisions on how you run the program?
No, not only do I communicate it to them, I tell them it is in priority order, that I want them first to be good neighbors to one another, that everyone is going to have a bad time if there are people sort of souring the experience. And so I want them first and foremost to be a good community, and then things can follow from there. That excellence component is, my friend Jeff Redding talks about a scale from 1 to 10. And 1 to 5 is what I would call excellence. And he talks about that being basically knowledge and skills. And for him, his word that he is always on is passion. And that for him is 6 to 10. For me, that excellence just means we've got to strive to be the best that we can be. And then beauty is a complicated thing. I think some people really feel like it is a thing. I don't know that I would agree with that. My favorite 2 performances I've ever heard in my life were my son's pre-K choir and the Villages choir from Florida, which is a retiree community, and a choir of 200. And I don't know if that it was the most aesthetically pure performance I've ever heard, but to see 120 members of that choir with thousands of years of experience up on the stage, literally, was one of the most beautiful performances I've ever heard.
Yeah, we can relate to that too. I mean, we've been to performances and before, where kind of like what you're saying is, you listen and it's like, and especially when it's in person and you can see the people and you can always just kind of get the vibe of an ensemble, right? Just by being there. And there have been so many times where, we'll be listening and afterward, concert performance is done, and we'll walk out and we'll say, maybe that wasn't like the most perfect performance we've ever heard, but man, were they being completely real and genuine on that stage. And that's what actually makes us want to go back and hear them again.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And that, I mean, again, my friend Jeff, his emphasis is all about passion, and people follow that. Man, they love to sing for him. I love to sing for him. And that's a lesson.
So what other techniques do you use to kind of really just implement that sort of community within your program? Is that just something you just kind of say at the start of the semester and hope they roll with it, or any other methods you have for that?
Well, I'm working on it all the time. I plan events throughout the year. I'm sure like many people do. choir dinners, little get-togethers, retreats. I try to make it clear by spending time with students. They all have my cell phone. I'm not like, texting them on a regular basis, but they know that I'm available if they need something related to choir. I think I do manage to maintain the appropriate distance. Some of them from time to time have called me dad. So, I think they have the right attitude toward me. But there is a sense that I care about each of them individually, whether they're a music major or not, whether they're super skilled or not. I try to make it clear from my interactions with them, and I try to interact with them often. It's deliberate. You hear this tips for new teachers, be in the doorway when they're coming in, hang out for a few minutes afterward, take an interest in what they care about. I think that has to be genuine, but those are definitely things that are in my mind. I want them to know that I care about them as individuals. And then beyond that, I try to, my high school teachers certainly did this. I try to communicate to them that I don't value them for their skills. That, no matter how good you are, this is a choir where we're all trying to pull together in the same direction. No matter how good you are, I don't know that your musical skills, knowledge, attainment should be a particular point of pride in this room. We are here to work together and to be a team. I try to also communicate to them that negativity, whether it's inside of rehearsal or outside, are not things that I'm going to put up with. I'm not as good as some people at sort of ferreting that out, mainly because I'm not, up in their business. So I don't necessarily always know what the problem is. But yeah, so there are many things that I do throughout the year to try to foster that sense of community. I'll say with particular regard to the structure of the choirs, in my community group, as well as everything except chamber choir, there is an audition in which I try to just assess the person's skills, but that's not to kick somebody out. So anybody's welcome to sing in any of those groups. And different folks have urged me over the years to pare down chamber choir, and I do that, but usually only for work ethic, attitude, attendance, not for singing ability. It's usually for, are you contributing? Well, actually, it relates back to that sense of community. Are you contributing to the community of chamber choir? Are you a happy camper? Are you working hard? Are you standing beside us every day? Or are you sort of pulling us down with your attitude and lack of attendance and things like that?
I mean, I'm a middle school choir teacher, so a lot of the recruiting and retention stuff that you're talking about and like choosing people for your choir is kind of what I'm already having to figure out for next year, like who's going to be in my varsity choirs. And I have some kids that right now, they have wonderful voices and are very talented, but they have such poor negative attitudes. And so I would much rather have like maybe not as a strong of a singer, but has a great attitude and contributes a lot more to my class, to the choir.
Yeah, and that's tough.
Yeah. But that's stuff that...
I'm sorry, you broke up and I thought you stopped.
Oh, no, it's okay. But yeah, those are just some things that those things are really important. Attitude, for sure. And if they're, contributing.
Yeah, and it's something I was scared of as a new teacher when I taught high school. I had 150 in my program as a high school teacher, and it was only 3 classes, and so they were big. And I was a new teacher, and I thought, well, numbers are what everybody cares about. And of course, we sort of began this conversation talking about numbers. But, in hindsight, looking back at myself as a young teacher, I think what I would have said is, listen, it's important to have numbers, but a choir can be 16 people. What really matters is the heart of the group. And are people there to make it a great experience for everyone, or are they there for themselves? And I think I would have been a little more interested in my top ensemble, quote unquote, being a group where I said, listen, if you're not going to, be part of what we're all trying to accomplish here, you're going to stay in that middle group. Maybe not kick them out, although there were a few in my first year or 2 or 3 of teaching that I should have kicked out of the program because of other, behavior issues. but I would have been more eager to create an environment, not necessarily a musical environment, but just a total environment for that top ensemble. And that's what I try to do at Tarleton. I'm trying to learn after 20 something years of teaching.
I think about I just thought about the movie Rudy. There's a scene where if anyone's listening that hasn't seen the movie Rudy, based off a true story, but in the movie, Rudy has finally made his dream team, which is Notre Dame, and he's a really small guy, but his attitude and his passion is just off the charts, and he's in practice with them, and obviously he's the smallest guy, and he's easily getting knocked around, but like he won't give up, and it almost gets to the point where some of the teammates actually start getting annoyed with him, because it's like, dude, just chill out, like you're probably not even end up playing at any point. And at one point, one of the leaders, he gets all mad and he like pushes him off, and the coach just like goes off on him, and he's like, well, he's being a little jerk or whatever, and the coach responds, I'd rather have a team full of guys with Rudy's attitude than your strength, or something like that. And I just think of that same kind of thing. It's about the quality of your attitude more than it is the quality of your voice or your instrument.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, and students, I do have performance majors, and performance majors are probably a lot more like football in the sense that there is a bigger guy and a smaller guy, and there is a skill set, and it's rare air up at the top. But the reality is that almost nobody is going to be doing that. I mean, I know a few people out of the hundreds and hundreds of musicians I've encountered over the years who are singing with the Houston Opera, with the Metropolitan Opera, who've gone on to pop careers and won awards. I do know a few, and I feel privileged to know them. But one thing I always tell my students is I was never in any doubt about their commitment to being the best. And it never affected their willingness to get up every day, smile, and do their absolute best. So really, they still would have been the people I would have wanted in the choir, because that was their attitude from the minute they walked out of their room every day.
I want to ask, if there was one, I don't want to say one because there might be a few things, but if there's something that if you could tell, like, let's say there's a young, like, there's a college student listening, or there's a young person listening that's they're wanting to go into the music education field, and if you could just give them any specific pieces of advice that you think are going to make the biggest difference for them going forward, I mean, what would you tell them?
Well, I probably do have a few. I think first, the thing that comes to mind is a piece of advice I would give myself even now, which is that worry over teacher pay and music being cut from the schools has been around for as long as I've been aware that being a teacher was a profession that you could have. And so for folks who are interested in music education and want to be teachers, there is a career there. And a dear friend of mine has a great saying, which is that your gift will make a place for you. And I would take that in two ways. If you want to be a music educator, work hard and your gift will make a place for you. If music education happens to go away for a little while here in the U.S., your gift will make a place for you. You'll find something else to do. But if you want to be a teacher, go for it, and don't let those big global worries get in the way. The other thing I would say to that young person, because again, this was me when I was 20 or whatever, is that everything in your life up to this point has been, let's get to the end of the semester and then you're going to get that A. That is not teaching. I believe the figure is that master teaching, most people feel it takes 10 years. And I know for me, it took at least that long to get to a place where I felt like, hey, I think I kind of know what I'm doing. And you don't feel ready? Well, you're not going to be ready. You're going to do the best you can for a long time and learn the hard way, in many cases, real lessons that are going to be taught to you by students who need you. And while you're learning those lessons, you're going to be serving them. And there's nothing better than that.
I think about something that Dr. D. Romines at Hardin Simmons, he would always tell us, is he always said that great students make great teachers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it was kind of kind of a triple meaning there. One, obviously, if you're a good student, you can become a good teacher, but also students make you a good teacher. Good students make you a good teacher. But then also the students themselves are teachers to you and as a teacher. And I mean, I think that's something to just remind ourselves, especially those of us in the education field, is like, man, the greatest teachers that you have are the ones that you're standing in front of every day in class.
Absolutely.
Good and bad.
Yeah. If anything,
the bad ones probably teach you a little bit more.
Those are probably the best teachers, believe it or not.
Maybe so. Yeah.
Well, is there anything else that you feel like you'd like to discuss just while you're here on this platform?
I think the only thing that I typically like to say whenever I'm on an education show where I might be talking to folks who are early in their career is, I talk to young people a lot about being creative because I'm often asked to talk about when I did, I don't know if you're aware of it, but Choramore, where I ended up doing something like 50 virtual choirs in the course of that year. Or with composing, that's another creative area where I'm sometimes asked to talk about that. When I talk to young people, it's a similar message to what I just said, which is that you've never had better tools than the ones that are in your hands today, and they've never been cheaper to be creative. And not only that, but to begin to put your creative work in front of others. And so I always try to tell them, please don't wait. If this is something you think you want to do, you must begin by making mistakes and making yourself vulnerable, and you can start right now. And you will improve and make strides, and you'll be amazed at the person you are in 5 years if you will begin to take steps forward. And it's strange. I feel like the tools are better than they ever have been before, but the anxiety and the fear of being vulnerable is perhaps greater than it ever has been before as well. So I would just encourage those folks who want to be creative to be brave and to start now.
Wow. Oh yeah. I mean, that helps me as a composer, and I'm sure that helps you as a teacher, Kara. Wow. Yeah, no, that's great. Honestly, that's probably a good place to kind of wrap this up. I don't know if we can really top that nugget of wisdom.
Well, thank you both for inviting me on. I know that you didn't know me outside of Travis's recommendation, but I hope this is helpful to you, and I wish you all the best in this podcast and your creative and teaching endeavors.
Well,
thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And last question before we go, for anyone that wants to connect with you or is possibly interested in your choral program, how can they reach you and your choirs?
Well, the best way, if you're interested in choir, is just to email me at robertson@tarleton.edu. And I won't muddy the waters by giving more than one email address. So just robertson@tarleton.edu for whatever your questions are. And then I guess my website, maybe troydrobertson.com, if they are interested in seeing what I'm up to. I've got a lot of creative stuff in the works. I've kind of changed directions a little bit creatively here. Although I'm fortunate enough to have an All-State coming up that I'm going to be conducting next year, and so I'm working on some composing for the first time in a while, and trying to get ready for that.
Oh, that's so cool! Wait, so you said you're going to be conducting All-State next year? Is that right?
The 2024 next school year, the tenor bass California All-State. So I'm excited to be able to head that way, and I'm going to take a piece out there as well. So.
Oh, that's super cool. Well, that'll be great. We'll be sure to link all of those things you mentioned in the show notes for anyone that wants to connect with you. Troy, thank you so much for coming on the show with us. We really appreciate it. This has been a great conversation.
Thank you both.